TIAA is on a mission. Why? Because 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So in collaboration with big-name artists like Wyclef Jean, TIAA released Paper Right, new music inspiring a new financial future. With 100% of streaming sales going to a nonprofit that teaches students how to invest. Stream Paper Right now and help close the gap.
Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, now streaming only on Netflix.
Hey, it's Mistress Carrie, reporting for duty from MCHQ for episode number 12 of the Mistress Carrie podcast. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Latini Creative Solutions, who have over 20 years of experience in design, print, and marketing, specializing in creative solutions that capture your voice and deliver your message. And I can tell you right off the bat that that is exactly what they do, because that's how they've helped me. From supporting and energizing your established brand to developing your company's identity and marketing campaigns, Latini Creative Solutions provides design that is thoughtful, focused, and creatively executed. You could track them down online at latinicreative.com and tell them Mistress Carrie sent you there for help, because they have helped me immensely get the podcast and Cocktails in the War Room and the upcoming Mistress Carrie merchandise store off the ground. This episode of the podcast is also sponsored by Jumptown Skydiving. Now, if you are looking to go 2.5 miles above the Earth's surface, get out of an airplane, and go over 120 miles an hour, well, let me tell you, I know exactly where you should go. You should head right to Orange, Massachusetts, which is 70 miles outside of Boston. Beautiful views of the Quabbin Reservoir, and this time of year is such a great time because the temperatures are starting to cool off slowly, and as we get into the fall, the foliage and the leaf peeping, well, it's a hell of a lot cooler to leaf peep when you're going terminal velocity. So if it's always been on your bucket list to go skydiving, allow me to suggest where I learned how to skydive and have been going for over 20 years. Jumptown Skydiving, you can find them online at jumptown.com. Before we get to this week's podcast, I want to thank everybody that has already gotten their Mistress Carrie Backstage Pass. If you're not familiar with Patreon, it is an amazing way to keep in touch with your favorite musicians and artists, and it gives you access that you wouldn't normally get from traditional social media outlets. I mean, sure, you can follow me online on Twitter at Mistress Carrie, on Facebook and Instagram at Mistress Carrie WAAF, or my YouTube channel at Mistress Carrie, or hell, even the TikTok channel at Mistress Carrie that I started and have yet to make a TikTok video with. But the thing about Patreon is that it gives you access you can't get anywhere else. So, for example, if you get a Mistress Carrie Backstage Pass, you're going to get access to exclusive polls, inside information, exclusive videos and pictures. And you're also going to get access to discounted merchandise in the upcoming Mistress Carrie online store. And that's just the start of it. Plus, you're going to start getting access to my archives and more exclusive stories. And then someday, when we get back to concerts, you're going to get a lot of backstage access when I take you to shows. And as I go gallivanting around this planet we call Earth, I want to take you with me and go through some of my travel adventures too. So get yourself a Mistress Carrie Backstage Pass. Go to patreon.com/Mistress Carrie. Okay, this episode of the podcast, it just feels like coming home. There's no other way to describe it. Mike Shue and I worked together at WAAF for 20 years. And when we turned Cocktails in the War Room, which is what I do every Tuesday night at 8:30 live on my Facebook page, when we turned that from a nightly show to a weekly show, Mike Shue was the first in War Room guest that I had. And it only seems fitting that he should be the first live guest in MCHQ, which is the Mistress Carrie headquarters studio that I built during the lockdown. So I was able to launch this podcast and a lot of the other things that I have in the works with my new company. So Mike Shue came over and sat down on the other side of the counter, and we cracked the mics and we just went. And that's how it always was when we were on the air together at WAAF. Like, that's just how we are and what we do. And that's what makes this podcast episode so awesome. Because if you listen to WAAF for years, this basically is so reminiscent of how we used to be. So I'm super excited for you to catch up with Mike Shue, find out everything he's doing, hear about his not one, but 2 podcasts and his new radio gig. Plus, we catch up about music and, well, all kinds of other stuff. So I'm super excited to start episode 12, which, by the way, for every episode of the podcast, there's a corresponding podcast playlist in the description of this podcast episode. And of course, it's centered around the man himself, the myth, the legend, the handsome motherfucker that is Mike Shue.
Hey, what's up? This is Sully from Godsmack. Strap on those boots, baby, because you are now in the trenches of the War Room with the one and only Mistress Carrie right here on the Mistress Carrie podcast.
What's up? This is Joe Rogan, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Her hair so lovely. Pretty eyes.
Hey, this is Brent from Shinedown, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie. Hey, Carrie, go put your bra on, girl.
Hey, this is Steven Tyler, and you be listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
What's up? This is Aaron from Stain, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Hi, everybody. This is Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and you're listening to the one, the only Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is David from the band Disturbed, and you're listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
This is Marilyn Manson, and you're listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
Hi, this is Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You're listening to Mistress Carrie.
This is Dennis Leary. You are listening to my favorite, Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is Corey from Stone Sour, and you're listening to, you have the privilege of listening to Mistress Carrie. Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
Is it working?
Hello?
How come you're always my guinea pig, Mike Shue?
Do I talk into this end? Is it this? Sibilance. Is this it?
You were the first guest on Cocktails in the War Room.
I know. I'm in your super posh studio.
And now you're in MCHQ. You are the first in-person guest in here.
I am in the inner sanctum.
Welcome to MCHQ.
This is like, wow. I mean, this is way nicer than my closet at home. I like soundproof my closet, and there's like old hooks and a bad light in there, and you've got a purple couch.
Well, you have a lovely wife and a daughter that adores you, and I have an ornery pug and Muppet. So I had the room in my house to be able to dedicate it just to this.
Yeah, it looks great. I mean, this is great, Carrie, and I appreciate you having me on. Do I have to sit in between Muppets? I mean, I got Animal here on my right, and you in Muppet form.
Yeah, Muppet Mistress.
Oh, this is my right. I'm sorry,
yeah.
And that's my left.
Yeah.
Okay. So do they have to hang out here? It's kind of weird because I'm talking to you and like the corner of my eye, there's like, and it's just kind of like, where's Dr. Teeth?
He was custom made for me and he's got an AAF shirt on,
I
which
saw
is
that.
so nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What's up, buddy? Oh, he's got huge toes and only 4.
Well, he's a Muppet.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like the Simpsons only have 4 fingers too, right?
That's true. And they're yellow.
Yeah.
That's called jaundice, actually.
Yeah.
The Simpsons,
they're all very sick.
Jaundice problem for 20-something years now.
Is that kidneys or your liver when you go jaundice?
I think it's both.
Is it?
I think so.
God, no wonder we're not doctors. That's what you always said. I am not a doctor.
Is this jaundice? I don't know. I think so.
Yeah. So this is the coronavirus has not made it easy to do any of the podcast episodes in person. It's been complicated, as you well know. And I've been doing everything either by phone or, video calls or whatever to do all of these interviews.
Friggin' Zoom.
It's
God, I hate
so
Zoom.
crazy. But like the goal was eventually to be able to do stuff in person in MCHQ. And so I built it to be super comfy and cozy in here.
I mean, this is sweet. This is nicer than like most apartments I ever lived in.
It has the vibe that I always wanted the AAF studio to have. And like, it's way cleaner.
Yes,
like, remember how disgusting that studio was?
There's no suspect stains.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? We moved in, when we moved from like the old New Balance building across the street to Leo Birmingham Parkway there, the studio was beautiful. We had all brand new equipment.
It was the old ZLX studios back in
nice.
the day.
And apparently they didn't have any kind of seepage problem that our staff did. And within a week, like a dog from like Monday's Mud had taken a dump on the floor and somebody had done something.
Stains that nobody knew what they were on the rugs.
And the guy that took care of the building, Mark Mingles.
Yeah.
Super nice guy.
Straight out of the cast of WKRP in Cincinnati.
He had been taking care of that building when WBCN was in there with their whole cast of characters and all these other radio stations. He's seen it all. It's all gone through. He's seen everything happen. And he was even like, what the hell's going on up here? And he's like an easygoing guy.
Yeah.
And he was just like, what are you people doing up here?
Yeah.
Like, we're just terrible with everything that is just sloppy.
Yeah.
We're just sloppy
We're
people.
just dirty people.
Yes.
And so like that was one of the things when I built my own studio is I was like, oh my God. I caught myself literally washing the countertops like 5 times a day just because I could, and they stayed clean.
Yeah. Oh, I can take care of that for you if you want. You need a stain over here or something on that pillow.
I even have coasters.
I know. I was looking at this. I was like, this is either a coaster or it's something she carved out of the skull of one of her enemies.
Yeah, no, it's a coaster with skulls on it. I have a whole skull full of them over there.
Well, I'm not using a coaster.
Yeah, use a coaster,
I'm sorry.
Mike.
Jeez, this is definitely not the... Oh, what's this? This looks like a suspect stain.
Yeah, I know.
What's going on over
I
here?
haven't wiped the counters down in the last 3 hours. I just had these fancy window treatments put in.
I know.
That block out noise like weed whackers. Things that we didn't have to worry about at the old AAF studio, I have to worry about here at the house.
Right. Well, we had the weed, just no whackers.
Right. So I had to find a way to block some of the noise coming in from outside.
It's very nice.
And
it's very professional looking.
yeah, that's what I wanted.
Yeah.
I'm not messing around. I don't
Except
like to
you
do
got
anything
these,
half-ass.
These Love American style beads.
Yeah.
Hanging in the middle here.
I know.
It's like I'm in Rhoda's apartment all of a sudden.
They were in my college dorm.
These were? Oh
Yes.
my God. I can imagine this. Is this what your college dorm looked like?
Kind of,
I was just
yeah.
good now. Yeah, totally.
Those
now
were
I
in
see
my
it.
college
Yeah.
dorm. And as I've been digging through all of my stuff, you're taking a picture of the stain.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
God, this place.
Next to my polar beverage.
Yeah.
They're going to love that.
And I found this little like bin of these beads and I was like, oh my God, I've had these things forever. I'm hanging them up in the studio. But that's all I have. Like, I wish I had the whole wall worth of these curtains and I only have.
So hippie.
Yeah.
It's such a hippie vibe.
I know. So I just hung them up there. They make me laugh. There's even a hummingbird feeder out the window. So when I'm sitting in here by myself, I can watch hummingbirds eat.
You okay?
Yeah. Things have gotten really weird in the last 6 months.
You got to get out of the house more. I know the studio's nice, but you got to go somewhere like, I don't know, where hardware store or something. It doesn't matter. Just leave. Get out of the house.
So part of the reason why I was like, oh my God, is because everybody, even though you came in on Cocktails in the War Room, like the last nightly night that we did Cocktails in the War Room, everybody's been like, when are you going to have like all of the AAF, the old AAFers on the podcast and stuff? And I was like, all right, well, Mike did Cocktails first. He's got to be the first one at MCHQ. But like, you and I have had so much going on just since Cocktails in the War Room.
Yeah.
Like, so much has happened.
Yeah.
That I was like, oh, well, we could hang out for a while and talk about, like, especially you, because you've got some really cool stuff going on.
I guess. Yeah.
So you've still got Breaking the Ice, the podcast that you do with Isaiah and Josh.
And that's great. And that's kind of like a continuation of that really terrible WAAF attitude.
Yeah.
Which
I've been on a couple times, and I appreciate that you guys have been on, let me on.
Yeah, we appreciate that. And so that's with Josh Dolan, who I used to do afternoons with at AAF, and then Isaiah, who was, like a weekend guy there and a fill-in guy. And that's been going great. We've had some great guests on. And
it's every episode is another layer in the onion of exactly how mentally weird you guys all are. It's like therapy.
No.
And you're saying compared to Josh.
Josh has issues. Like I have issues, but Josh has these serious issues, like these weird, this whole treat thing. He hates the word treat.
He gets triggered by words. Yeah, he gets triggered by sounds. He gets triggered by foods and textures.
He doesn't like. Yeah, he's just. I'll always stick to my theory that he's on Rumspringa, like he was in an Amish sex cult, and now he doesn't know where they go.
It's almost time to grow his beard back and go back and build a barn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, get rid of those buttons, put those hooks in.
Yeah, it's so weird.
He's like, he's got some deep issues, and I was trying to think because we're trying to get a psychologist to come on and analyze those.
Good luck.
I know, right? They'd be like their Everest.
They're like, I don't want to put my medical license anywhere near this podcast.
No, you'd think they'd want to and write a thesis on it and be part of history. But then I've been trying to think, is there anything like that I have, like any words that drive me crazy or like give me a visceral reaction to the point where, like, if you say the word treat,
he gets nauseous.
The veins, like he turns red and he gets angry and the veins in his head pop out and he doesn't know why. That's the thing.
Yeah.
He doesn't know why.
It's going to take some kind of hypnosis or something to dig into his psyche.
Yeah. Because I've been with him when he's been shit-faced. And it's still, you can't really get into.
He was shit-faced the last night AAF was on the air.
Oh, he sure was. He was crying.
He was hugging everybody.
Oh, he was crying and drunk and just embarrassing. Yeah.
Can you believe has it been 6 months? Or is it,
yeah, just about, right? It was like February, 22nd?
It was 6 months this week.
Yeah. I don't even
February
know what date
21st.
Is this Monday? Are we recording on a Monday? I don't know either. That's bad.
But it's been 6 months. Like, can you believe that?
It hasn't. It seemed like it's been much longer to me.
Really?
It seems like it's been years. It seems so long ago that.
Part of it feels like yesterday for me, and because of the virus and all the isolation and stuff, it seems like someone else's life almost.
See, that's with me because of the virus and not going anywhere. It just seems like it's been a few years when it's only been 6 months.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
How different the whole world is.
Yeah.
And it's like everybody keeps talking about it. And like, because you and I were the last full-time members of the air staff when the station went off the air, we've always kind of had that in common. You know what I mean? Like we hosted music shows and we were both there the night that it went off the air and kind of went through all of that together. And it's like, I look at what happened in the timing of it with AAF and then the virus hitting weeks later. And it's like, I joke all the time, Mike and I either found the best time to get laid off or the absolute worst time on the planet.
Yeah, right.
And I go back and forth between whether or not it was a really good thing we got laid off when we did or whether it was the worst timing in the world.
Yeah. I agree.
My answer is different every day. I don't know.
Yeah. It's just like, it just made looking for work that much more challenging because everybody closed down.
Yeah. But then we had like a 2 or 3 week head start navigating all of the processes of being laid off.
Right. Yeah.
And we had kind of already gone through like the mourning process of it all and had kind of taken that time to focus on what it is that we were going to try and do next. And
that was the hardest part for me, figuring out what else I could do. Because much like you did other stuff before radio. Like you worked in like production, like live production. You drove trucks.
A truck and did all of that stuff. But not for that long.
No, same with me. Like I did other stuff, but I didn't do it for that long. And this is pretty much the only thing I've been doing with my life is talking into a stick in a padded room.
Yeah.
And
thank God people listen. Otherwise, we're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Yeah. But Yeah, that was the hardest thing. It's like, well, what do I do now with my experience? Which is tougher because it's also a business that's been hit pretty hard by the pandemic.
And it doesn't make sense to me in a lot of ways that why it's getting hit so hard. Like, this was the frustrating thing for me after the few weeks between when AAF went off the air and the virus really locking things down here in Massachusetts. All I can think about is what we would have been doing if AAF were still on the air and the coronavirus hit. That we would have quarantined ourselves together like we did during blizzards and stuff. And we would have locked ourselves in the studio.
Yeah, I would have been divorced by now.
Yeah.
6 months in, I would have been already paying alimony at this point. Not allowed to see my child.
But we would have been organizing fundraisers, kind of like I did with the T-shirt thing with the War Room and all of the things that we could have done.
And trying to get trying to get the facts down.
Yeah.
Trying to find the people to talk to get on the air.
And then trying to help people get through their day. We would have been there for the essential employees that were just working themselves to the bone.
Right.
And then to have been able to be there to take the mind off of the people who were really suffering.
Yeah.
And that hurt so much that for the first time I wasn't essential.
Yeah.
I wasn't the one going, well, I've always said I have to have a 4-wheel drive vehicle because I have to get to the radio station no matter what the weather is. And then all of a sudden the shit hit the fan and I didn't have to go to work. And I was like, oh my God, what do I do now?
I was just talking to Craig Saman from the Telegram and Gazette. We talked to him after. He wrote a really great article.
So
on
sweet.
The end
it
of
was
AAF.
So nice.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
And really knows his stuff. And I was just talking to him, and I was saying that I didn't realize it at first because it just had become part of the way I perceived life. And that was just everything I did and everywhere I went and everyone I talked to, I always had to think, I could talk about this on the show.
Oh, right.
This is something I could, it was life is like prep.
Yeah, you were constantly show prepping something.
Right. That's everybody who's in that business, or you do a talk show at night or whatever, all those late night talk show guys.
Yeah.
You got to do it every day. So everything you do, you guys, well, what's the angle on this? Could I use this as content?
Or this is what everyone's talking about. And trying to find an angle that is just yours.
Right.
Because everyone else is talking about something.
Yeah.
And going, all right, well, let me research this one little nuanced detail and see if I can find a take on it that no one else has. And at the same time going, all right, well, now I have to go and listen to everyone else's take on it to make sure that mine is original. And it's you're constantly racking your brain full of information.
Right. And so I was still doing that. And I was doing the podcast with Josh and Isaiah, but it's not, as you know, it's not the same thing.
Right.
And it took a while for me to kind of stop doing that. And once I stopped doing that, it was nice.
Yeah.
I miss working on the radio and I miss working at WAAF, but it was kind of nice not being in radio because I hadn't really thought or lived like that in a long time, and over 30 years, most of my life pretty much. And so it was kind of a new thing to me to just do something with my daughter or go somewhere or read something or
and not have to have your phone out to
listen to music or something like that.
Yeah.
And just be and just being like that's what it is. That's this right now, and it has nothing to do with what I have to do tomorrow. It was weird. It was not weird. It was just a different thing which I quite enjoy.
Yeah.
And I learned to enjoy. But I still miss being on the radio. Because it's just something I love doing.
Yeah.
At the same time. So I'm not saying I don't want to or I didn't like being in radio.
No, it's just that
it was
do
just a
something,
different
your
feeling.
brain functions in a certain way for so long. I had, 2 weeks or whatever after we got off the air, and then I started going in the War Room every night. And the War Room forced me to quote unquote show prep, right?
Yeah,
because
so
I was sitting down every night.
You had a place to use those skills.
Yeah, so I was like, okay,
yeah.
I need to find out what the statistics were on cases and fatalities of the virus in Massachusetts versus what they are nationally, and I need to know what's going on and what businesses are open and where people can get resources. Like I had this it's right here, this leather-bound book that I would keep on my ottoman in the living room. And anytime I saw something on TV or whatever, I was always writing things down.
Yeah.
I want to talk about this in the War Room because I was on for an hour or so every night.
And just to let people know, listening, that's exactly what you do. Like whatever radio station you work at or wherever, you're always doing that. You're always like writing something down or putting it in your phone saying or emailing yourself.
You have those desk blotters that are the paper, and it's like ours are just sketch pads of like notes and arrows and websites and phone numbers. And
I was doing that for nothing.
Yeah.
I was like still doing it out of like total habit because I didn't know what else to do with my brain.
Yeah.
You know,
at least I had the War Room to funnel it.
Yeah, you had that to actually to put a use for that. And I was like writing things down. I'm thinking, what am I doing? I have a notepad full of stuff here. I'm going to talk to myself about when I'm taking a dump. Oh, Mike, what's going on today? Oh, boy, those Red Sox. Woo-hoo. You know, it's just, but yeah. So you had like the War Room thing that was good. That's kind of like you were staying in shape.
I was and like then when you came in and did the last nightly War Room with me, so that was the 81st night in a row, and then I took that week, and I wasn't in the War Room, and I didn't do anything that week, and I remember that feeling when there was a news story. And someone asked me about, oh, hey, did you see so-and-so died? Or you see so? And I was like, no. And it was the first time in like 25 years that I didn't know something had happened. Because when we were at the studio, it was impossible to not know what was going on.
Oh, yeah.
There was a TV up in your face that was just on whatever channel you put it on. So it always had a news station on or whatever. We had the news wire. Then we had multiple internet computers, and we always had Twitter and Facebook and our phones.
Everything. It was all coming in at once.
So when there were days like the marathon bombing or like something like that, where we were so fully immersed that I don't know how you were, but after a day like that, after like the 2016 elections and like stuff like that, that's just completely immersive, I would leave mentally exhausted.
Yeah.
To the point where I couldn't even listen to music on the drive home.
Right. Yes.
Because it was like I was just being I was being sprayed with with a fire hose of information.
Yeah.
And all I wanted was like quiet.
Right.
And I remember that feeling when somebody asked me about something that I didn't know about it. On one hand, I was like, oh my God, that's really nice that I didn't know, because that means like I actually unplugged successfully. Mm-hmm. And then I got totally panic stricken, like, what else have I missed?
Right, yeah.
And like totally freaked out that the world was happening and that I just didn't even know what the hell was going on.
Well, I had the same exact reaction.
It's so weird.
My wife would tell me stuff like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. I'm like, when did that happen?
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, whatever. I've been listening to Neil Young for a week, you know, and it's like, really? When did that? And I had the same reaction, like, oh my God, I really got to start reading the news again, like getting into it again every day, like going through my sites and getting like all that stuff. But at the same time, I had that like feeling of, wow, I really removed myself.
Yeah.
I really got off this grid anyway.
Because it's a ride. Like when you get into any form of media, you're strapping in on a ride. And podcasting is great because we don't have to worry about countdown clocks and hitting the post of a song and all of that stuff. And we also have the luxury that if one of us says something completely fucking stupid, like a Mike Milbury situation, where we could go after the fact and go, I don't think that's going to stand up well.
Right. That's why I'm counting on only 15 minutes of this podcast to actually be left after you go through.
But like living on that level of, I don't want to call it stress, but like heightened awareness.
Yes.
Where
That's
you
exactly
know
what it is.
your mic is live And first of all, you're like, don't say fuck, don't say fuck, don't say fuck, don't say fuck, which is like constantly going through your head.
Yes.
And then you're trying to word things so that you're like, it's not even just the swear. Because that George Carlin skit about the words you can't say, that's not how it works. It's not just the word, it's the context. Mm-hmm. So like I can call you a pussy and I can talk about a pussy cat, but I can't invite you to eat mine on the radio.
I just say that
and there it went.
For a second, that made me a little tense because your fiance is like in the next room. And he's a trained a man who's trained very well to defend this country, and I'm afraid that he's going to hear something wrong and then bust in here and like jam a pencil into the back of my neck.
But like, I want people to understand like the context, right?
Oh yeah, you have to.
That one time using a word is totally fine and innocuous, but you use that same word in a different way, and it's an FCC violation in the end of your career.
Well, a perfect example of that is asshole. So you may have heard us on it WAAF at one point say asshole or call someone an asshole.
Yeah.
You can call someone an asshole, but you can't refer to their asshole.
Right.
As a body part.
Right.
You're like, you are such an asshole, but you can't say,
I put this in my asshole.
Right. I'm going to stick my foot in your asshole.
Yeah.
Or anything like that, because that's for some reason, that's a completely, there's a word for it.
Yeah, it's context.
It's just you can't.
It's got to do with I think the way the FCC describes it is like bodily function or fluids.
Description of bodily functions.
Yeah, excretory stuff or whatever. Yeah. And even now, I'm triggered because the drop of me talking about putting something in my asshole, Josh Dolan would have already sprinted down the hall to the production studio to isolate the audio so you could have made it a button in the studio and I never would have been able to get rid of that button.
Oh, my God. That's too bad.
But like, especially when you're talking about a controversial news topic, you're live. And especially in 2020, if you say anything and it's taken out of context and you don't have a track record of really being a good person or whatever to kind of back it up, just one slip, one whatever, if you didn't mean it and you're gone.
Yeah.
What's also happening right now is that we're really finding out with people that are in front of live microphones who are sexist, misogynistic, racist assholes.
Right.
Because they're letting it show and they're getting caught on film. And it's like, oh, you really are that bad person. Like, you're out of here. But when you sit in front of those live microphones, there is an edge to it where you're just like, God, I hope today's not the day I say something so bad that I lose my whole career over an unintended slip of the tongue or something being taken out of context. And it's really hard to get out of the habit of being on that edge. Like when I'm in the war room because that's live, I still kind of feel that way. But with the podcast and stuff, it's like, there's always, I feel like you have that safety net of, well, if I really needed to, I could go and edit it out.
Yeah. You can self-edit.
Yeah. Even though I try not to do that. And I don't think I've had to take anything out of any of the interviews that I've already done because I'd like to say what I mean. And I don't feel like I'm a bad person. You know what I mean?
Right,
so racist things are just going to come flying out of my mouth because I'm not a fucking racist.
Yeah, exactly.
But you still are afraid of like saying the wrong thing and having someone take it.
And that's there.
Yeah.
It's there. It's not even in the back of your mind. It's up front and center.
Always.
It's that nun with the ruler staring at you. As you're practicing your penmanship and you're just waiting for, Sister Serena to come down with that ruler on your knuckles.
Yeah.
And it can happen, like you said, so easily now. So many people have like either hit a bump in the road or just lost their careers entirely.
Yeah.
And some for good reason.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, but it seems like now we, especially with social media, it's like, you're guilty before proven innocent.
Right. Yeah, they isolate that one little 5-second drop.
Right.
And they play it over and over again on TikTok, and that's all that you're gone.
Right.
Never to be heard from again.
Mm-hmm.
Banished.
Yep.
Meanwhile, there's podcasts and outlets where like people are legitimately racist and
there's
like they're still
local,
like, hey,
there's local access, cable access shows, hosted by Nazis,
right?
But that's America,
right?
Exactly.
And
unfortunately, it's ugly, but at the same time, it's the beauty of this country,
right?
That's why a lot of people came here, because they could say what they wanted without getting thrown in jail or disappeared or shot,
right?
And so you have to kind of live with that. Doesn't mean you can't react to it. Doesn't mean you can't have your own cable access show called Nazis Suck.
Right.
Let's talk about how Nazis suck for an hour, and
where do we start?
Yeah, geez, this is easy. This is the easiest show I've ever done.
We literally fought a war over it and the entire world agreed.
Yes. So.
Yeah, it's so strange to like have that mindset in my brain change because we did something for so long.
Yeah. It became
it's like a muscle that
it's muscle memory.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. Like for weeks afterwards, I'm like taking notes for nothing.
Like I bet
because I didn't know how else to live.
I would screw up so many posts right now. If like I jump back live on the air, I'd be like, oh shit, I forgot that song was 17 seconds intro. Like,
let me tell you, I just started again on the Pike.
I know. That's one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on, because I'm so excited you're back on the radio. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. And you're absolutely right. It took a little like back in the saddle, shaking off the dust and the rust and hitting that post and stuff. And that's the kind of radio station it is. They play their classic hits.
Yeah.
So they're playing rock, but you got to keep the music rolling and you got to hit that post.
Right.
And that took some doing.
Yeah. Well,
it's been a while.
That was
6 months is still a long time.
That's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you in, because A, it's been 6 months. B, you and I were kind of always on the same journey when we were at AAF together. It's like we both hosted music shows for a really long time. We were the last men standing at the end of it. And so whenever people see me out, like you're the first person they ask me about, like, how is Shu and
nice.
What's going on? And I didn't just want the podcast to be, let's talk about how great AAF used to be. Like, we have to move on with our careers and our lives. And I thought the podcast in general would be a great kind of representation, and to be able to take people on the journey and go, well, this is what it's like to go out and do new things on your own and to spread your wings and try new things. And so the first thing that you did was the Breaking the Ice podcast, which you're still doing with the guys, with Isaiah and Josh, which is just unhinged craziness.
Yeah. It's
fly
pretty much
by the seat of your pants of whatever you guys feel like talking about.
It's kind of continuing the AAF attitude.
Yeah.
In many different ways. And Josh Dolan, it's technically a hockey podcast.
Right.
That's why it's called Breaking the Ice. And he originally did it with Andrew Raycroft from the Bruins.
Yeah.
And then Razor got a job over at Nesson, so he couldn't really do that.
It's a good thing because he's got a good face for television.
He does. He's a handsome
guy.
He is a handsome man.
Yeah.
For a goalie, he's
right?
a handsome guy,
exactly.
right? Yeah. So that was already kind of in place, and then he and Isaiah, were like, well, why don't we just keep doing this? Now that the radio station's gone, we can still do this. And then they asked me to come on as a guest, and then they were just like, why don't you just why don't we just work with us? I'm like, okay. I have really literally nothing else going on. I mean, this is like 3 weeks in, and it's like I'm just starting to realize, what am I going to do with myself? Jesus Christ. It's like I just had it was that disorientation of trying to adjust my head into that space of not doing radio.
But then, like, one of the differences between you and I as people is your ability.
Is our genitalia.
Well, there is that.
Yeah. Because Carrie's penis is way bigger than most men's. I'll tell you that right now. It's gigantic.
But your ability to really dive into the minutia of music, like you really are. I mean, we're both music diehard scholars of it.
Right.
But this Neil Young podcast that you're doing.
The proper term for what you're talking about, Carrie, is
nerd.
Yeah, geek.
Yeah.
Nerd.
But then you launched the second podcast, which I don't know if everybody knows about it, because it is a very niche music lover, geeky
of one particular artist.
So if you like or love Neil Young, Long May You Young, which is your Neil Young podcast. I mean, you guys are diving in. Where the hell did you meet two other nerds that wanted?
They're going to be so psyched you called them nerds.
that you guys were like, I feel like it's that scene in what Step Brothers are like. Did we just become best friends?
Oh, it was absolutely like that.
Do you want to go do karate in the garage?
It was totally like that. And I actually rubbed my nuts on Russ's drums. So on Breaking the Ice podcast, we had two guys from the band Town Meeting on, and they had a new album coming out. So Josh grew up with them. There's three brothers in this band, and Josh grew up with them in Ayer, Massachusetts. So he wanted to have them on, and I had heard their name and stuff, but I never really pursued their music. And then once I started listening to their music to prepare for the interview, I was like, wow, these guys are actually really good. Like if you like, it's like Americana stuff. So if you like the Lumineers and Wilco, and if there's a lot of Neil Young in there, obviously,
like a Tom Petty kind of
right,
vibe,
that kind of stuff, but a lot more folky. And all the members of the band sing, and they're all excellent musicians. So you've got this like really amazing mix of styles, and song styles and things. But so we did this interview. We started talking about Neil Young in the interview, and we were really getting into it. And it was Luke and Russ Condon. So Russ is the drummer and he sings. Luke is a guitar player and he sings. And Josh Dolan was like, in true Josh Dolan fashion.
It's unbelievable how he can say these kinds of things out loud.
In true Josh Dolan fashion, he's like, who is Neil Young? I don't even know who that is. I was like, you don't know who fucking Neil, Rockin' in the Free World. He's like, oh, that's Neil Young? I'm like, yeah, you worked at a radio station that played that song.
And on the air.
Yeah. So that's Neil Young.
How did you not know that?
Like, I thought he was like a former president or something. I was like, oh my God, Josh, get help. Get fucking
he really
help,
does
you moron.
need fucking help.
So we thought that was funny. And then Luke Condon texted me afterwards and said, hey, it was great finally talking to you, because he had listened to WAAF forever.
Yeah.
And I texted him back saying, yeah, it was really fun nerding out about Neil Young with you guys. And jokingly I said, well, we could probably do a podcast about Neil Young pretty easy. And he texted back like, I'm totally down with that. We should totally do that. And next thing you know, he's texting me this like whole like plan that he had written up on what we should do with the podcast and stuff like that.
He went full geek.
He did. He went full on nerd.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. And, aside from you and maybe just a couple other people, not even my family, okay? There's not a lot of people I can talk music with.
Yeah.
Because like you said, I just get really into it. And sometimes I think I scare people where they just want to get away from me.
Like you're way better at like the fourth song on this album. Like I'm more of the jack of all trades, master of none kind of person. And my music knowledge, a lot of it is like this random fucking weird shit.
Well, that's what music knowledge is, random weird shit.
Yours is like, this album came out on this year, and I know the artist that did the artwork, and did you see the liner notes? Thanked this person. Like, you are encyclopedic in your music knowledge. And just being able to keep track of Neil Young's musical career.
Yeah. That's
a whole section of your brain.
Well, he's got, I think now he has 66 albums out. That also includes, I believe, his archive releases. So he's going back into his archives and he's releasing live stuff and albums that he had recorded in the 70s and just shelved. He had like 3 or 4
Isn't
of those.
it unbelievable that artists have that level? Like when Prince died and everybody was like, can you imagine what's in the vault? And it's like...
It's years worth.
That's what I mean, that a guy like Neil Young or Prince or whoever just has this vault of unused stuff.
Yeah. I mean, just years and years worth of recordings. I'm talking length of time. Not like just an amazing amount. And that's because those are the kind of people, like you mentioned, Prince, and that are like a faucet. They're literally a faucet of music.
Yeah.
And you put a guitar in their hand or put them in front of a piano or put them in a recording studio, and it's just like turning on a faucet.
It's like their channel. It's like they're an antenna.
Right.
And they just accept these signals from outer space or like wherever, and it just flows through them.
Well, my theory on that is that, certain certain rock stars are aliens, like David Bowie, and he was just called. Your mission's done. You got to come home.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I just got this hot wife, and I'm living a really nice life.
Yeah,
in
can I
Manhattan.
hang out here for a while?
All right, we'll give you 5 years. All right, but then you got to come home. Same thing with Prince. Guy was definitely an alien.
Yeah.
You know, but that's with Neil Young specifically. That's a great challenge, and I love Neil Young. Like, he's one of those artists I love so much that, much like Rush. So I love Rush. They're like my favorite band, but I don't like every little thing they did. There's some stuff from Rush that I just think is, oh my God, that was a mistake, or this is terrible. Why would they even put this out? And that must be one of Geddy's songs that he wrote, or something like that. And same thing with Neil Young. Like, Neil Young has a lot of really amazing stuff, but he also has some really just mind-bogglingly bad things that he's released, that he's put out. And he's the kind of person that he'll just do it because he feels like he has to do it, like you were saying. Like, it just comes out of them.
And like a person like that, it's like they have to follow a bad song, let's say. Let's say there's a song that you just don't like. But he has to get that out because it was probably a cork in the way of an amazing song.
Right.
That came after that, but that he had to get that out of his system. It's like that riff wouldn't stop going off in his brain, so he just had to just write the song, record it, have it exist so that other stuff could freely come out.
And with him specifically, he would write stuff and, we wouldn't actually record it for years after he wrote it. And a lot of artists are like that.
Yeah.
There's also the stories of of Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones, where Keith Richards woke up in the middle of the night, had this riff in his head, pushed record on his tape recorder and played a little bit on the guitar, and then he went back to sleep and woke up in the morning and he had that riff, and then they built Satisfaction, which is still like their biggest hit or whatever.
Right.
And that was like, a 20-minute process or whatever. Some great songs were written in 20 minutes and recorded in less time. Black Sabbath's first album was recorded in 2 days for like $800 or something like that.
And I'm not making the equivalence of it, but remember when that first Godsmack record came out?
Right. That was like something
that was their demo.
They did that on their own.
It cost them $2,500 and they sold 4 million copies, 6 million copies, something like that.
They were able to capture something that people could latch onto, that they identified with, that they felt. And that's pretty much what Neil Young is all about, is capturing that moment. He calls it, the term cinema verite, right? So you're just kind of recording everything, and it's the handheld camera. And
right.
It's kind of like you're the observer through the camera. Same thing with him. He calls it sonic verite. So once he walks into a studio, you just hit the record button, and you just keep it going until he leaves.
Just in case.
And he did a version of the song Helpless with Crazy Horse that was like 9 minutes long, and he felt was one of the greatest things he'd ever done in his life musically, and the engineer forgot to hit record. So ever since that day, he's like, when I walk in the door, you hit that record button and just let it roll. I don't care what it is. You could be in there farting. I don't care. Get everything, because some ideas will come out of that or whatever.
Yeah.
He's a fascinating person. He's got an incredibly diverse musical output. He's experimented with different kinds of music.
He's universally respected too.
Yeah, he's a great
by artists of all genres.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
When you talk about songwriting or whether, Neil Young, yeah. And one of the things that's really cool, even though he's older, is that he's one of those older artists that has really wrapped his arms around new technology.
Right.
Which a lot of older artists haven't. And so he's created this outlet for all of those archives that, like, he's got this membership thing that you can...
it's the Neil Young Archives.
Yeah, and that he's now pulling all this stuff out. And if you're a fan of his, that you can go in there with him and, like, dig through the stuff that he's putting out.
He's adding stuff every day on that, and he has his kind of like his newsletter called the Times Contrarian, and he's just it's kind of like a blog. He writes articles on things, whether it's his music or what's happening politically in the world, or and that's overwhelming because there's like dozens of things being added to that every day. He's just pouring that out onto his...
Like, you want to talk... Like, we were just talking about how not being able to turn our brains off doing what we did for so long. Can you imagine to be able to create that much stuff? like what it's like being in his brain doesn't shut off.
Yeah, it's constantly going. And he's the kind of person we've learned that, if you can't help him achieve that goal, then he just pushes you aside. And that includes if you're his wife.
Well, I was going to say, talk about setting the bar high for Daryl Hannah.
Yeah, right. I mean, that he was married to his previous wife before Daryl Hannah, Peggy, for like 30-something years or something like that. And then all of a sudden it was Daryl Hannah. But it's just like he is a guy who is, he's got a mission, he's got a vision, he hears something in his head, and he'll do anything to get that, to reach that goal, to either record it or film it or write about it or do anything. And he doesn't care who or what is in his way.
Right.
And he's left a trail of bodies, figuratively, maybe literally. I don't know yet. We haven't dug that deep. Neil's a pretty weird dude, man. Just trying to achieve his goals. And, but he's a really fascinating character. So what we do is every episode we cover the next album in his catalog. So we're doing it in order of release. And the great thing about Neil Young, like I said, there's a lot of stuff that I think is brilliant, and there's a lot of stuff I think is just crazy and awful. But the next guy will think it's like Luke Condon or Russ Condon will love it and will argue about it. And, and it's more of it's not so much like a lot of music podcasts can be rather academic.
Yeah.
And I personally enjoy those.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You have the ability to keep up in that level. Like you could dive in there and get academic if you wanted.
If it was just me, it would be so incredibly dry and boring, because I'd be like, oh, and he used this Pink Gretsch on this song and whatever. But with Luke and Russ, not only are they really talented musicians and songwriters, so they can give you that angle on what it's like, but they're really funny. And so we just get some beers and we sit around. And I think if we weren't doing this podcast, we would just sit around in Luke's garage and just drink beers and talk about Neil Young.
Yeah.
All
it's
the time.
Basically what you're doing. You just have microphones.
Yeah, right, exactly. So it's not completely academic. We're it sounds like it is, but we're really busting balls, and there's actually been some characters that have chimed in, and it's been really fun. And it's we're slowly building. The Neil Young fans are finding out about it through social media.
Well, that's the thing. You guys are the only Neil Young podcast.
Right. There was one, but the last thing they put out was in 2018. And so we're the only one standing right now.
Which is crazy considering the body of work, the length of career.
Right.
I mean, you mentioned Rush.
Yeah.
There's a ton of
There's
people.
a bunch of Rush podcasts out there. Yeah, and good ones too. But yeah, we were all really surprised because we all searched immediately. Like, is there another Neil Young podcast? What should we be doing? We couldn't find one.
And that's one of the differences, like when I interview musicians and stuff, which I do a lot on the podcast, you come from a musical background. You've been in bands. You have that ability, and you're on the Neil Young podcast with two guys that are musicians that play or sing at the same time. So they're incredibly musical and talented. So you guys can have this conversation from a musician's perspective. And that's always...
Whoa. Let's not call me a musician.
Well,
okay, that wouldn't be fair to people who are actually working and good musicians.
No, but you've played in bands.
Right,
and
I've been in some bands.
Like I played clarinet in the marching band. That's the
then
end.
You've been in a band.
Not really.
That's a band.
That's the end of
that's
my
a band that
musical
walks and plays.
experience. So like, there's always that, like you and I could interview the same person, but we would do two completely different interviews because we would come at it from two totally different ways.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things when I interview musicians is that I can't get on that level of nerding out about the string, or like I have to ask from a novice's perspective and ask them to translate from nerd to non-nerd because I don't understand when they really get technical because I'm not a musician.
Well, see, in that sense, you are probably reaching more people with that interview because what's the percentage of people listening do you think that are musicians and working bands or in bands and stuff?
I get it.
When you interview someone, I think it can reach more people. When I say reach, I mean people can relate to it more because you're not talking about what kind of guitar they're using and stuff like that. You
and
know,
if I do, I
talking
ask
about
them
fun
why
stuff.
then and explain it in layman's terms, because I don't understand the difference between this guitar and that guitar. I mean, I know that Slash plays Sweet Child of Mine's riff on a Les Paul. Like, I know that a Les Paul sounds a certain way because you listen to the songs that have been recorded, and it's like, you could try to play Sweet Child of Mine on a Stratocaster or whatever, but unless you had that kind of guitar, you're not even going to come close. And then, I don't know if you heard the guitar podcast that I did with Chris Traynor and Doc Coyle and Mark Morton. But in that, with 3 guitar players from 3 totally different styles of music, they even said, like, you could take Jimmy Page's guitar and all his gear and go up on his stage and try to play his song, and it's still not going to sound the same because it doesn't come out of his fingers or out of your fingers the same way that his does.
Because you didn't live his life.
Yeah.
And you could take one of the greatest guitar players in the world. You could take Joe Satriani, right? Who is just a virtuoso guitar player.
Yeah.
And you could do exactly what you said. And he can play anything, really.
Yeah.
But he can't make it sound,
right,
like Whole Lotta Love or whatever, because he's not that person. It's not going through the Jimmy Page filter. It's going through the Joe Satriani
And that's
filter,
the thing, like, when you start talking about specifics and effects and gear and all of that stuff, I don't have that reference point in my brain. But when you're doing like a Neil Young podcast, to have musicians doing it with you, to really be able to get in and analyze the guitar.
Let me just say, we don't spend really a lot of time on that at all. It's not that technical. There's a lot of...
I've listened. I get it.
There's a lot of ball busting and a lot of like juvenile, poop jokes.
But you could if you wanted to.
Right.
I make poop jokes because I can't nerd out about the other stuff.
But it's like, if that's part of the conversation, know, it's like, if his guitar sounds different on an album, we'll explain why.
Yeah.
Or whatever, but it's not fully techno. I mean, what we concentrate on is the stories surrounding the making of the music.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of really interesting stuff. Like, one is like when they were making, after the Gold Rush, he had this bass player come in, George Reeves, who was the bass player for Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And he had him come in to play bass on a few songs, and George Reeves showed up one day completely painted gold. Like painted his entire body gold. And one of like the assistant engineers was talking to the producer, David Briggs, and he was like, "Hey, Reeves is here. He's painted gold." And Briggs is like, "Oh, what?" And he went out and looked at him, and he told Neil, and he was like, "Okay, whatever. Well, I mean, if that's what he needs to play, get him some more gold paint." Yeah. For crying out loud.
Yeah, whatever, man.
And we did an interview with Nils Lofgren, who played on that album and who's played with Neil Young and Bruce Springsteen. He's in the E Street Band and stuff. And I asked him about that, and it was just the way he answered. He was like, "I can neither confirm nor deny that happened."
The gold laminated paints.
Yeah, that's, so we talk about a lot of like what happened around then, what Neil was going through, his divorces or drug problems or drinking, whatever. And we talk about the history and any kind of weird, crazy story that goes along with it. Let me tell you, Neil Young, is one of the great musical characters. And so there's a lot of really crazy stuff he did just to kind of, whether he did it to get the music or just did it to do it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to talk about, and with each album, it's a pendulum that swings. So he'll, we just talked about his album Comes a Time, which I'm not really crazy about. It was kind of folky, and he used some session. He was very un-Neil Young. Like he did a lot of overdubbing and session musicians and stuff like that. And so I wasn't a big fan of that. But then now we're going to do, our next episode is Rust Never Sleeps, and that was like mostly done live. And
it's got way more vibe to it.
Completely. Every album has a completely different vibe. So that's why we thought it would be interesting to go through each album. And then we're not going to go, every episode's not going to be completely on an album. We're going to cover his films. He's made a couple of films. He's done a bunch of concert films. He's done some side projects. We did the Stills Young Band album, an album he did with Stephen Stills, which in my opinion was the birth of yacht rock. It is, and quite honestly, one of the shittiest albums I've ever listened to in my life.
But a very important genre of music in the archaeology of rock and roll. Like yacht rock has its place.
If you love the Little River Band, then you can thank Neil Young and Stephen Stills for making that crap album and spawning that. You love Christopher Cross.
See, I love Christopher Cross.
Oh, well, then you would probably love the Stills Young Band album.
I know Danielle and I share a love of yacht rock.
Danielle from the Greg Hill Show loves the yacht rock.
Yeah, I do too. I don't know if it's just the time of my life in my youth where that was like on the, because it was very popular it was all over the radio when I was a kid. And I can't get that image. Remember that terrible Demi Moore movie, Striptease?
That wasn't so bad.
I can't get that image of Burt Reynolds covered in Vaseline out of my head because that's how I imagined him painted with gold lame paint.
Right.
I can feel it squishing between my toes. Like, that's the image that's in my head right now. I can't get it out.
Or it's like Stuck in the Middle by Steelers Wheel. Yeah. Now, I can never listen to that song without
thinking of Reservoir Dogs?
Yeah, without thinking of Michael Madsen dancing around with that guy's ear in his hand, talking into it. Can you hear me? Hello?
It ruined it forever.
Yeah. But that's like.
But it's super interesting. And for people that love not just Neil Young, but I think music, like really love rock music in general. That
if you like music history, this may interest you. And there was a lot of great musicians surrounding Neil Young, not just Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. The band that he uses, Crazy Horse, has an amazing
like I
story
like Neil Young music. I can appreciate Neil Young, but if you're building like my Mount Rushmore, like he's not even anywhere near being on it for me.
Yeah.
But I can listen to that podcast and be like, oh, that was really interesting. I didn't know that. And I'm like a passive Neil Young fan at best, but I could totally appreciate his place in musical history and why he's an important artist. But you guys always seem to find a way to like give me some weird little nugget of thing that I was like, oh, okay.
Well, that's what we're into. We love digging and finding these bizarre little stories.
It's cool though.
And you mentioned before, it's like, it's a very specific thing. It's a podcast about Neil Young's albums.
Yeah.
But that's the world of podcasting.
That's what makes it awesome.
Right. The more niche you are, probably the better.
Yeah.
You have a specific focus. You're Mistress Carrie. You're like the one
whatever that means.
Well, that's the thing. That's what that means. You're that one of a kind, person, and you have these interviews with people that on subjects that you love dearly. So that is like that's your lane.
Yeah.
And then I do this Neil Young thing. So thankfully, Neil Young's got a lot of fans. So hopefully, like if I was doing a podcast on like some obscure like band from like the Volcano, like I'm going to do a Volcano Suns podcast, and it's like me and probably one of the dudes from Volcano Suns, like the only people listening to it. You know what I mean? So it's like, when we found out there was no other Neil Young podcast,
it's
we're
so
like,
weird. I can't believe there wasn't one.
We were like, wow, that's weird. We could actually have people listening to it because we didn't really start that out to, like to kind of be successful. We didn't have any visions of like.
I think
success. We were like just doing it because we love doing it.
Successful things come from passion, though. And you came at this from a passion, and it's like, well, there's obviously other people that share that passion. And when it becomes successful, greater than what you had imagined, it's because you came at it from a pure place. You go to a songwriter and you go, write a hit, a song that's going to make me a lot of money and it's going to suck. It's always the songs, like they didn't write Bohemian Rhapsody because they expected it to be a timeless radio classic. They wrote it.
They had no idea.
Yeah, they had no idea. And it's like, that's where the best stuff comes from. Like for me, I mean, it's not what the record and music industry wants to hear, but like I consider my podcast like a music lifestyle podcast. Most of the time I'm interviewing musicians. The last thing I'm asking about is the music.
Right. Well, that's the thing. See, that's what I'm talking about. Your lane. You're really good at talking about, what their interests are and
their
you
lifestyle.
Find that thing in common.
And that's not with like the people that surround them. It's like talk, and that's what we had to do at work in a lot of ways at the radio station through and not anybody's fault, but it's like, well, I'm only getting access to this person for 10 minutes.
Right.
And they have a new record coming out, and they are coming to town on tour, and the tickets do go on sale next Friday. So those are all obvious things you have to talk about. What's been really interesting in the last 6 months is there's barely any records coming out.
Right. No tours.
There's no tours.
Right.
And I found it really interesting that when I go to ask people to do interviews, that they're like, well, I don't have anything to talk about.
Yeah, I've gotten that answer a bunch of times.
What do you mean you don't have anything to talk about?
Yeah.
You, like, all the music you've created thus far has come from a place. I just want to talk about you and the things you're interested in. And
right, yeah.
And musicians get really weird about that. It's like, I'm interesting? And it's like, you're fucking interesting, dude.
Yeah.
People are willing to spend $150 to come and stand in a crowded arena with some dude spilling draft beer on their back the whole night.
Oh, that sounds great. It's been so long.
I know. To hear you play for 2 hours, like, yes, they'll sit for free and listen to you talk about your first guitar lesson or who you grew up with.
To me, that's stuff I'd love to hear.
Me too.
That's fascinating stuff to me.
And I can't believe that musicians are like, I don't have anything. I'm not interested. There's nothing to talk about. And I'm like, huh?
Well,
I don't understand that.
There are some musicians who are, socially awkward, like, the late, great Neil Peart. Never did interviews.
Yeah.
Never did meet and greets. And everyone was like, well, he's a snob. It's like, no, he just feels weird that you think he's great because of what he does.
Yeah.
And he is just also on top of that, a naturally shy person.
Right.
So you never really got to see him.
He communicated in a language that he was comfortable socially, which was playing the drums.
Right, exactly. He did it with music, and
that's what he did.
That's
and with
all
lyrics,
he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And all that other stuff, the promotion, he left to Geddy and Alex. So there are some musicians, like, you hear their music, you see them play, and they're amazing, but then you talk to them and you realize they're kind of like shy, or they don't like to talk, or they feel awkward just talking to you.
I always cracked up when they came into the studio and they would sit down behind the microphones in the studio like you and I are now, and they'd be like, okay, so do I sit here? Do I sit here? Can you hear me? Like, okay, so you're going to ask, like, they were nervous.
I know. It's like, how a microphone works.
Like, you're literally in front of them all the time.
You can do it.
But you could see that they're more comfortable in front of 10,000 people in a dark arena than they were sitting in the studio with us just answering questions.
Yeah.
Which I find
And that was a
hilarious.
challenge. That was a challenge sometimes, because you had to loosen them up.
Yeah.
Because you're in a recording studio, and even if it's like the, MCHQ here, which is like a cool and comfy place, it's just weird for them to not, like, this is our natural habitat.
Yeah, exactly.
But you put me on stage with a guitar and I'd be like, what the fuck am I doing?
Shit.
Jesus
this
Christ.
Is gonna suck.
I'm gonna get pelted with garbage.
I remember that when Bruce Dickinson was doing one of his solo albums and he showed up at the radio station and he brought his son with him who was like 10 or something at the time. Remember Ash, the old security guard on West Street, the little Pakistani dude?
Yes.
He called me on the hotline. He was like, and I'm going to do the accent really badly. And he was like, Mistress Carrie, there is a man down here named Bruce Dickinson, and he is here to see you. Can I let him up? And I was like, Ash, he's an Iron Maiden. You can please.
Oh, Ash had no clue.
He had no idea. So then Bruce Dickinson comes upstairs with the ID sticker. Remember the visitor badges that said Bruce Dickinson on it? And I was like, oh my God, I love Ash so much. He made Bruce Dickinson a visitor badge. But then I was like nerding out on the air. I'm like, oh my God, Bruce Dickinson here, whatever. And his like 10-year-old son like was giggling about it. So I asked Bruce if I could turn the mic on that was in front of his son. And he was like, yeah, all right, whatever. And I was like, what's so funny? And he's like, I just don't understand why, like, you're making such a big deal out of, like, it's just my dad. And I was like, your dad's Bruce Dickinson. He's like the coolest guy on the planet. He's like, not when he's running around the house singing in his underwear.
Exactly.
And then
not
all
when he
of
like,
a sudden,
he's pooping in the bathroom.
Yeah.
You can smell it in the whole house.
So first of all, I've never been able to tell that story without the image of Bruce Dickinson singing Tom Cruise style in Risky Business in his tighty whities.
Yes, but he still has the sword.
That's right. And the flamethrowers and the puffy shirt on. But like, you're welcome for that image of Bruce Dickinson in his underwear, by the way. I'm glad I could pass that off to you. But it really is funny that, like, at the end of the day, they are, no matter who, just a regular person.
Right.
With, with phobias and insecurities and
worries and
yeah.
kids and families and obligations that are not rock star related.
Yeah. People ask me all the time.
That.
They're like, who are like the coolest people or who are the biggest jerks? And it's like, for the most part, like people were just cool because they came in and it was like, hey, we're just going to sit and talk for a while. And
nobody was really, no, that's not true.
I only had two. I talked to Dez from Devil Driver. He and I had that conversation about who
I'm afraid to name the names on your podcast, so I'll refrain from doing that. One of them may or may not be in Everclear. But, you know, like Maynard Keenan, right, from Tool.
Yeah.
Difficult.
Yeah.
Difficult interview.
But not disrespectful.
No. Not he's not like a jerk in any way. He is like Neil Young, where it's like he's his own person. He's into what he's into.
Yeah.
And he doesn't suffer small talk or anything like that. Or,
no.
But if you can touch on something that he's interested in,
100%,
and you know, kind of enhance that through the interview, then it's great. And you know, he'll
they
go
can
on like
tell if they walk in the studio and you don't know who they are and you haven't done any research.
Yeah, so
and you
can't.
just don't know. And a guy like Maynard or a guy like Neil Young, if you show them that you actually did a little bit of research and actually tried to figure out, like I would always find out, like, okay, well, what makes them comfortable? Like, what do they like to drink?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like...
Yes, you were always good about that.
Like singers, you can't give them cold water because it's bad for their vocal cords.
Yeah.
And you never give them anything with dairy products on a day that they have to sing because it creates mucus on their vocal cords.
Right.
So I would always make sure that there was room temperature bottled water for the singers. And those little details would show them, like, hey, listen, like...
Yeah,
I did my job. I'm not an idiot here. Like...
Right.
And so interviewing somebody like Maynard or a Neil Young, where you're like, no, this is a professional atmosphere. I took the time to understand your process. And that's when you can get them to kind of let their guard down because you're being respectful of their time.
Yeah, once the subject realizes that, then they loosen up. They go, okay, this isn't just some promo thing where I have to, you know, give specific answers. They're talking about something I'm really into.
It's like that
this is cool.
SNL skit, like, remember that time you were in the Beatles?
Yes, right, exactly.
That was awesome.
Yeah, you know.
That's what makes that skit so genius.
Right, because that actually happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just interesting meeting those people. And I was always nervous in interviews, not for like doing the interview, but hoping and praying they weren't jerks, and they rarely weren't. But
isn't that saying, never meet your heroes? Isn't
that? Yeah, because you might, and that happened to me once, and I'm not afraid to use his name because, I mean, he probably knows this, but Henry Rollins, you know, there's someone I looked up to and I admired greatly, and I'm a huge Black Flag fan. You know, when I was in high school, they're one of those bands that just opened up my eyes to a whole new world of music and just the world in general. And finally got to meet him in an interview at the Reading Festival in, I think it was 1994. And it wasn't like a one-on-one interview. It was kind of a press conference interview.
Yeah.
And he was there and everything seemed fine. We're about to start. And I was the first one in line. I made sure I was there.
Yeah.
I was like the first one in line. And some guy from the late WHFS in Washington, D.C., went up to him and started talking to him. And then I just saw Henry Rollins put his head down. He was like shaking his head and smiling, one of those like, I'm going to kill you smiles.
Yep.
And
this motherfucker.
And then he looked up into the guy's face and said, imagine the physics. My fist into your fucking face. And I was like sitting like right there, first in line, right? Oh, look at me. I'm first in line. And the guy like said something and I couldn't hear what he was saying. And then like the guy walked away and goes, yeah, that's right. Walk away, you fucking asshole. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And then I look over and the producer's like pointing at me going, go, ask your first question. I'm like, I'm not asking anything right now. And I was totally like, I was like, Mr. Rollins. And so it was like, I had this other question and I was like, this is a bad, tense situation. He's seething.
Yeah.
You know, he's just like, you can see the veins in his
neck. Go pet the pit bull after you just threw red meat at it.
Right. You just poked it with a stick.
Yeah.
And
I didn't mean to badmouth pit bulls. I love them.
But it was just, after that, he was a jerk to everybody. And it's probably because that one guy.
Yeah.
But it just got me because then, like, the 2 nights later, I saw him on MTV kissing Kennedy's ass.
Yeah.
You know, and being funny with her and stuff. I'm like, why couldn't he have been like that with us? But, you know.
And he's a guy talking about, like, being socially awkward. Like,
right.
He is one of those people really is. Was it William Shatner that, like, they have this friendship where, like, they eat Thanksgiving dinner together every year or something. And, like, and Henry Rollins is one of those people that really doesn't do well around a lot of people all the time. But if you're not like that in that quirky kind of weird antisocial way, then you're not going to get the creative process you get out of them.
Right. That's what fuels it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. We can't all be Corey Taylor.
Yeah,
you
right.
know, who's like Mr. Personality, like can just brighten up any room he walks into.
But he's also somebody that if you cross him and you're a jerk to him or disrespect him,
absolutely. He'll let you know.
Oh, he'll tell you about the physics of his fist hitting your face.
But he's he's a great interview, especially when like you know him.
Yeah,
you're well prepared.
His
he knows
record
what you're
is
talking
so
about
good. Like that's one of the things is that I miss is being able to sit around and talk about like the new music that's coming out.
Yeah.
Like you and I would get off the air and be in the office and be like, oh, check this out, or hey, did you hear this new song yet? And like his new music, that record is all over the place. And I asked him when he was on the podcast really early on, before anybody had heard anything off of CMFT, I was like, what makes this not a Slipknot or a Stone Sour album? And he just laughed and he said, it's fun.
Oh man, he's never been shy about talking about what a pain in the ass his bandmates are to him.
Well, I don't even think it's the bandmates. I really think that for a guy like Corey to create music like Slipknot, he has to go to a place in his brain temporarily that's not fun.
Yeah, you're
because
right.
he needs to be able to funnel that part out in that music, and it's cathartic in a lot of ways because it allows him to exercise those demons. Yeah. But you can't live there all the time. And I think that's what he was talking about, that he was like, it's not a fun place to go, but I have to go there to do that creative process.
Yeah.
And he needs Stone Sour to create this something else. And then I think the solo record, I think he needs that. He's got all that fun, lighthearted, eclectic music that doesn't fit in any of the other lanes of his life, and he needed an avenue for it. And I think that's what he was talking about, that's what this solo stuff is for him.
Less pressure.
Yeah. And he doesn't have to confer with anyone else, that it's just his singular vision.
Right.
Which has got to be he's in a band with 8 other people.
Right.
Just trying to get any agreement. Like, can you imagine? You know what it was like trying to wrangle the morning show.
Right.
Can you imagine trying to record a record with 8 other people that are all in that part of their brain?
Like Slipknot, especially.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. We're not talking about fucking BTS here. This is Slipknot. These guys have fucking issues,
They've got things to say.
They don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
And they just, So
like getting into a creative argument with Clown.
Oh, my God.
Like what that whole process is like. And the fact that they've released so many records and been around 20
and
years
have kept it together.
Is a testament.
That many people.
That's what I mean. I mean, obviously, they've had some, lineup changes or whatever. But for the most part, like...
No, to keep it going, especially a band like that.
Yeah.
That puts just literally every cell in their body into what they're doing, when they're in Slipknot.
Yeah.
That's amazing. They're still
it's
around.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And so you've got those 2 podcasts, and now congratulations. I'm so happy that you're back on the radio.
Yeah, I'm pretty psyched that,
you're on the Pike 6 to 8 every afternoon.
Monday through Friday, I'm on 6 to 8. Saturday, I'm on 4 to 7 after Bob and Zip.
They had me on their show.
Yeah,
by
how
the
did
way.
that go? I didn't get a chance to listen.
It was, so they were covering mornings and they reached out to me. So Bob Rivers sends me a thing and he's like, hey, it's Bob Rivers. And I'm like, I know.
Walking around in women's underwear, Bob Rivers?
Yeah, I'm like, I know who you are, Bob Rivers, radio legend. And they were like, we were wondering if you'd want to be on the show. And like, I couldn't get yes out fast enough.
Right, yeah.
I'm like, you're Bob and Zip. What did you think I was going to say? No?
I know.
And so I did the show with him one day, and it was so fun. But at the same time, again, so super conscious of like, don't say the wrong thing and like be really careful. And they started asking me questions like, well, what's the craziest thing at the AF studio? I'm like, guys, I can't answer that question.
I did kind of tell that story when I was on with them. They asked me, And
Which
I told
one?
the Alicia Class story.
Oh, you did. Oh,
but I did it in full on like family Disney mode.
Right.
You know, as best I could.
Yeah, Mickey Mouse talking about the porn star.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All of a sudden it turns into an Ice Nine Kills t-shirt.
Right.
Like what? Yeah.
But they're awesome.
They're so cool.
When I was on with them, I was just like giggling like I was 15 again.
So was I.
Yeah,
I was totally nerding out about
Yeah.
the whole thing, you know? And
They're like one of the reasons why I got into the business, because I would listen to them every morning. I would switch between them and the Big Mattress with Charles Lacodera. You know, I go back and forth and listen to those guys, and they just did such an awesome job.
Yeah,
you know, it inspired me.
I was like, of course, yes. And so I'm so happy that you're doing that now. Like when I saw your tweet and stuff that it was official that you were going to be on every day on the Pike, I was like,
yeah, they were really
awesome.
great about, you know, making that space, and it's just great to be back on the radio. And
yeah,
you know,
for as
like
much as we've talked about podcasting and stuff,
right.
and the limitations of radio and the pressures of certain things, like there is just something about it that nothing else compares.
Yeah. It's a completely different thing, and I've been doing it for so long. And like I said earlier, you know, it was kind of nice being removed from it completely for a little while, and I kind of
you missed it.
You know, well, when I figured I was completely removed from it, and I wasn't really in that frame of mind anymore, I kind of I relished it a little bit. I thought this is really cool, but at the same time, it's like I'd jump back on the radio whenever anybody asked me. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like I love the podcast. I love the War Room and all of the other things that I'm building now that I have planned in the coming months. Like I'm so excited about all of the things finally coming to fruition that I've been spending all this lockdown time building. But I still every day miss being on the radio and that no safety net live react to whatever's going on.
Immediate connection.
Yeah. The connection with the audience, like especially because I haven't left the house all that much. And when I go to the supermarket or I go to get gas, even though I have a mask on or whatever, people still see my hair. And
you get the purple beacon going there.
And, you know, and some people still are, you know, just finding out about the podcast. Like, well, what are you doing? And somebody sent me a tweet the other day and they're like, hey, what's Greg Hill up to these days? And I'm like,
what?
Like he has a radio. Like, what do you mean?
Oh, that's so funny.
There are still those people that just
Right.
aren't that
Yeah.
plugged in, that don't know what's going on.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, I'm so excited. Check out my podcast. And so, you know, it's a slow go when it comes to, especially in this day and age, getting the word out on stuff.
Yeah, you kind of start over. You
Yeah.
know, and
But I miss it too.
Yeah, it's nice, and I'm really thankful for the people at the Pike.
Yeah.
You know, especially people like Bob Goodell and Chuck Perks, who are both former WAAF
who were
people.
both there the night that we
Yep.
the last day on the air.
Yep.
That they were some of those guys that were like, we couldn't imagine sending AAF off without Mike Wild being there, without Bob Goodell being there.
Right.
Like
And
all of
Bob and
those
Zip,
people had to be there.
Yeah.
But
they've been really great, and I'm also, you know, I'll also start doing stuff, you know, hopefully for their website, like blogging and making videos and stuff like that. But you know, it's just nice to be back on the radio. It's only a couple hours a night, but that's really good.
Yeah,
it feels really good being on. And another thing is, I've lived in Worcester for 21 years, and it's finally nice to be working in Worcester.
Yeah, you don't have to drive.
I know. Well, the commute is like a 5-minute commute.
Yeah, it's so weird.
But it's like I love like working in Boston. I love working at WAAF, but it's kind of cool to now like work in a station that's in the city I live in.
Yeah.
And talk about what's going on in the city I live in.
Yeah, it's
because
cool.
it's all firsthand information. Like I'm living it like for real.
Right.
And so it's great. Yeah, I'm really, really excited about it.
Dude, I bumped into Kevin Barbary at the mall yesterday.
Oh my God.
And he was wearing was it the Dharma Initiative or the DARPA Initiative from Lost?
Oh my God.
That was what was on his face mask.
That's so Kevin Barbary.
And he recognized me first and said, Carrie, and I turned around and I saw him, but he had the mask on. And as soon as I recognized what the mask was, I was like, oh my God, that's Kevin Barbary.
That's so Kevin Barbary.
And so we talked in the mall for a while and got caught up on, because I haven't seen him since the station went off the air. And then he was like, hey, I talked to LB and he's doing really well. And I was like, I had called LB a few times, and he, you know, after we went off the air, I like called him, and after he quit, obviously, I called him to reach out, never heard back from him.
Well, he had, I mean, serious medical issues.
Yeah, he was really struggling physically. And so after I saw Kevin at the mall, Kevin texted LB and said, hey, I just saw Carrie. She was asking. And then all of a sudden, hold on, I'm going to read you the text. I immediately got text from LB, which I couldn't believe.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, like LB is texting me. And he, it says, you goddess. Kev says you wanted me to chat you up. Give me a call when you can.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like,
Very
and he used
LB.
an emoji.
Oh, he got really onto emojis.
Yeah.
He's not. Yeah, he can do that.
So he's having another surgery, and he bought a convertible. He calls it his midlife crisis.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
this just now happening.
That's his convertible.
Oh my God.
And he said that he wants to come on my podcast after his surgery when he feels better.
That'd be great.
Which I was like, holy shit. But a lot of people always ask me about, hey, how is so-and-so or whatever. Like I had Stiz, you know, in the war room. But to hear that ALB is better than I've heard him in a while, which is really good. And seeing Kevin Barbary was super cool too. So for anybody that's kind of wondering how some of the former AAFers, and Danielle's supposed to be coming in the war room, we're going to have a slumber party.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's going to break the internet. Jesus.
Because she got to go to bed so early.
Yeah, that's
She's got to get up so early. So she's going to come in. We're going to, I think we might do it via Skype so she can do it from her bed and we can have a slumber party. I know.
I've had this dream. Jesus.
So only a few things have changed. And then you referenced it earlier that I'm getting married.
Yes.
Which is crazy.
That is crazy. I immediately texted you that scene from Moonstruck.
I know.
I got news. Let's go to the kitchen.
Who's dead?
Who's dead? Right. Again?
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't work out for you, Loretta.
Yeah. I know, it's so true. It's so true, but I'm super.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so
congratulations.
So I put
I know the dude.
Yeah,
he's a good guy. He wouldn't scramble my brain with a pencil. He'd shoot me from about half a mile away.
Yeah, you wouldn't even hear it coming.
No, I wouldn't. I just thankfully.
But I put the picture up of like my engagement.
I know
ring
your ring is
stuff.
so Mistress Carrie.
Yeah, it's so cool.
That's the only engagement ring I've ever seen with skulls on it. I'm
really?
sure there's one somewhere, but that's the first one I've ever seen.
It even has diamonds in the eyes of the
skulls.
skulls.
It is a sweet ass ring.
Yeah, I'm super psyched. Like it's exactly.
Dude knows you.
Yeah. And you know what's really cool? Like you've been married a really long time, and you and Francoise have been through early stages of your careers. You've been through layoffs. You've been through illness. You've been through obviously raising a child together and relocations and all of that. When you are with somebody that you're like, that person really knows me and isn't trying to change me, isn't trying to make me different, or isn't trying to put you on layaway and going, well, I'm going to, this will be a gradual process, but I'll get them to see things my way.
Right.
Like when you just are with somebody that's just like, no, you as you are.
Right.
If you're you're the one, and if you're like this for the rest of your life, like I'm totally cool with that. I'm into it, like whatever. It's so nice.
It's awesome.
And like some people were commenting on Instagram, like, I thought you were already married. It's like, I was, and it definitely did not work out. And this feeling that I have now, I didn't realize was missing before. And in some ways, like when you've gone through it and it goes bad, you learn a lot from that. And I'm grateful for all of the stuff that I learned from the failure of the first one, because now you kind of look at it and you go, oh, wait a minute. Now I recognize what's real. And it's been the nicest part of 2020.
Yeah.
It's like the only happy thing that I've
really... The good news of 2020.
Yeah, that it's like, it's so strange to just be purely happy and to have something to just be happy about.
Right.
Because this year has not made it easy for anybody. And I have so much empathy for people that are, every time they turn around, 2020 just kicks them in the nuts again. I mean, it really feels like that over, like what we were talking about at the beginning, like, did we pick the best time to get laid off or the worst time to get laid off? Right. Because this year has just been relentless with oh, okay, this is what you think. Like, it would have been bad enough just going through this election cycle.
Right, but this makes it like just so much more.
The isolation, the economic stuff,
bizarre.
like it's just so. And so, just having that one little sliver to have that person be like, you know what, in the midst of all this chaos,
right, your world. There's good stuff happening in your world.
Yeah, it's given me like I'm looking forward to things now. I'm making plans now, and even though it's been super scary, like leaving the nest of WAAF, because for me, I mean, I was there 29 years. You were there, what, 21?
20 years. Yeah,
like you get real comfortable.
Oh yeah,
it's scary as hell.
You get used to stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
And then getting thrust into that and thrust out of that nest and into a world that's unrecognizable. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
And so to have like this thing to look forward to and like to have people just be like, hey, congratulations. I'm happy for you. That's so great. And like have a reason to smile it's been really nice.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So we finally had good news to talk about. So that was the other reason why I wanted you to come into the podcast now. Is it like it's been 6 months?
A lot's happened.
But a lot of good stuff is coming now, which I think was important to be able to talk about. It's like there's some really exciting things like the podcast you're working on, getting back on the radio again, like my company and my podcast and getting married. It's like we're moving. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined being where we're at right now.
Right.
Having like had the 6 months to process, move on or whatever. And it's nice to be able to kind of.
Well, it at that time, it would have been extremely difficult to see anything positive going on because it was just one disaster after another, not just losing the job, the pandemic, everything, you know. And
even though the pandemic is still super crazy.
It is.
And scary.
But I think we're slowly adapting, at least some of us are slowly adapting to it.
And science is moving forward and we're learning more and understanding more.
We're dealing the best we can. But 6 months ago, it didn't look good at all.
I ate in a restaurant yesterday, inside a restaurant yesterday.
That's crazy.
It was really, and now it wasn't at capacity. It was definitely noticeably different. You know, the server's wearing a mask and gloves, and there were empty tables all around. We had to wait for the table in the car. We couldn't wait inside. But, like, I felt a little normal waiting, like sitting at a restaurant table inside and ordering food.
I have one question, though. So my wife and I, we went to our favorite bar in Worcester, Nick's, in Kelly Square. A great place. And we were talking with we go in talking with the bartender, Molly, and we order our drinks. She can't serve the drinks on the bar.
Yeah, they have to bring them to the table. You can't sit at the bar.
Well, that's the thing, Carrie. You can sit at the bar. You can't be served at the bar.
They have to have a waitress come and bring it to you?
She had to walk around the bar and give it to us on the other side.
It's so weird.
And then, it was just...
Like, I sat at a table, like a little high-top two-person table that was pushed against the bar. And the drinks were not handed over the bar. The waitress brought them around.
They can't hand the drinks over the bar.
I don't, like, Corona?
I think someone just made up that rule because they could.
I don't know.
You know?
It's so weird.
I can't wait to... That's one of the things I miss. I miss going to the movies.
Yeah.
And those are just starting to open up again, too, which is nice.
Yeah.
Of course, it's
Bill
going
and
to be
Ted
weird.
comes out this weekend, which I can't wait to see.
Yeah, that's going to be great. And I miss sitting at a bar and having a drink.
And talking to the bartender.
Or just sitting there and giving off that fuck off vibe. I'm having a drink. Don't fucking...
I'm having a day. Leave me alone.
Yeah, just let me sit at the corner of the bar or just watching like a Red Sox game.
Yeah.
You know, even though they suck. It would just be nice to sit at the bar and drink. That was just something I really miss.
Yeah.
You know.
Those little things. Like I said, like walking inside, I was expecting to have to eat in a tent outside.
Right.
And when we got there, I was like, oh, wait, we can go inside?
Yeah.
Like 6 months ago, if you said, oh, you're going to be really excited to go inside a restaurant and eat instead of eating in a tent in the parking lot, I'm like, are you on dope? Like, what do you mean? And it's amazing how much our brains have been able to just kind of get used to the change. It's just so strange.
Well, I think there's a lot of hope.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping for a vaccine, as everyone is, and then when that happens, you know, Then we got to figure out who gets the vaccine first.
Or who wants to take it first?
Yeah, who wants to take it? You know,
it's like, do you want to try it first? I'm a little afraid. You know,
that's that whole when that whole thing happens. I mean, that's good news, but at the same time, it's just going to add to the chaos.
Yeah,
you know, obviously there should be people like, you know, the emergency room people, doctors, first responders, people like that should get the shot first. But then after that, who should get it first?
Yeah, they made movies about this stuff.
Yeah.
And then is there a microchip in it? Hold on, let me put my tinfoil hat on.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Let me put my Tommy Vexed tinfoil hat on. Because we both interviewed Tommy from Bad Wolves.
Let me break out the dry erase markers and explain to you what's happening here. Yes, this is the vaccine. And
that's another guy. Go in that guy's brain. You'll be exhausted.
My God. Yes.
He's got a lot going on in that big brain of his.
It is. He's an extremely intelligent dude.
Look at the big brain on Brad.
Right. Yeah, so hopefully...
I love you, Tommy. Yeah. So in 6 more months, we have to sit back down. If we don't sit down together before then, we definitely it's like we're this time capsule now. We're going through this process together. Months. Yeah, like where are we going to be in 6 months?
I know. I'll probably be in Walpole.
Yeah. Does that mean I'll be in Framingham?
Can I Zoom from prison? I mean, Tiger King can Zoom from prison. Can I get a Zoom in here, please?
Oh my God, right?
I'm crying out loud, you know.
Isn't somebody supposed to get pardoned this week by the president? Is he going to get pardoned?
Joe Exotic?
Yeah.
Is the president going to pardon him?
I heard there were rumors that people were pushing for him to get. I know. Can you imagine?
That should be his vice president.
Oh my God!
I mean, might as well go all the way.
Mike Pence would die if he lost his job to Joe Exotic.
To Joe Exotic, right?
What would Mother think?
You know what? If you're going to do it all the way. Right?
Yeah.
You know, don't do it half-assed.
Joe Exotic doesn't do anything half-assed.
Right. And neither does Trump.
All in.
Right? So it's like, yeah, if you're going to do it, you might as well.
Just go full on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming and hanging out with me.
Thanks. Thank you very much for inviting me into the inner sanctum here.
Yeah, thanks for coming to MCHQ.
The coziest studio I've ever been in.
It's super cozy.
Life.
You know what? Like, it's taken me until someone else was in here to really be able to understand if it had the environment that I want, like the vibe I wanted it to have.
It's totally, I mean, aside from sitting in between 2 creepy Muppets, I mean, it's really just a beautiful, you've done a really beautiful job in
Thanks,
here.
Mike.
And it sounds awesome, too.
Yeah, it sounds really good. Everything works.
Yeah.
Which is good because I don't have an engineer to call when something's broken anymore. So if something breaks, I have to figure it out. I've been doing a lot of Googling on how to fix things.
Yes, thank God for Google.
I know. And all those people that do those YouTube tutorials about stuff.
Thank you so much.
You guys are heaven. Like the people that are like, this is how you edit with this software.
Oh my God.
This is how you plug in these versions of microphones. You
the
guys
Adobe
are
Audition
heroes.
people that put up stuff on YouTube. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah. You guys deserve a spot on Mount Rushmore because you are fantastic people. All right, I don't know what you do with the rest of your day, but I'll let you go.
I got to go. I got to drive over to Fitchburg now and do the Long May You Young podcast.
Oh, there you go.
I got to get into Russ Never Sleeps.
I got to go research wedding cake.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So there
you
go.
I'm going to see you this weekend.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's not going to be 6 months.
Well, no, it'll be 6. Before we sit down and get behind microphones.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not going to do the. You're not going to go Facebook Live.
No, I'm not doing a wedding podcast.
Weddings in the War Room.
No, but the people that do have the Mistress Carrie backstage pass on Patreon, they're probably going to get a little extra behind the scenes stuff with the wedding and all that stuff.
Like the consummation.
Well, not that part.
Oh, come on.
There's some other stuff.
That's pay-per-view.
Yeah.
That's Patreon. That's for Patreon right there, people.
That's called Pornhub, Mike.
Yeah, well, you can still get paid.
So just a little plug for the Mistress Carrie backstage pass.
Nice.
That if you don't have it yet, I always try to put little extra stuff up on there for the people that want, a little bit of extra mistress.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I like my weirdness with extra mistress. All right, I'll see you soon. I'll see you at the wedding.
Yeah, we'll see you this weekend.
All right.
All right.
See? There you go. Spend a little extra time with the one and only Mike Shue, who I couldn't love more if I tried. We need to do that more often. It's so much fun hanging out with him and just talking about whatever it is that we feel like talking. Random countertop stains, whatever. He's just so much fun. Don't forget the corresponding playlist that goes along with every episode of the Mistress Carrie podcast. The Mike Shue episode playlist is so awesome. And also in the description of this podcast are the links to his other 2 podcasts and to the Pike, the radio station where he is on every weekday afternoon from 6 to 8 at night. That's it. If you liked what you heard, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode of the Mistress Carrie podcast. Find me on Facebook and Instagram at Mistress Carrie WAAF, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Cameo, and to get yourself a Mistress Carrie backstage pass on Patreon at Mistress Carrie on all of those. New episodes out every Wednesday and, of course, every Tuesday night at 8:30. I will meet you for a cocktail in the War Room, live on my Facebook page.
To celebrate joining Pantheon Podcasts, Rock Camp, the podcast, the official podcast of Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, is giving away a guitar signed by Mike Portnoy of Dream Theater, Marty Friedman, formerly of Megadeth, and legendary shredder Zakk Wylde, plus our rockstar counselors like Vinny Appice, Monty Pittman, and more. To enter to win, simply follow, rate, and review our podcast on your preferred platform, and that's all you have to do. For more information, go to rockcamp.com/podcast.